So Draupadi won back her husbands. They were leaving the court with everything intact, wealth and kingdom intact. When they left the hall, Duryodhana was furious with the Dhritarashtra for giving everything back. He basically had a tantrum, saying, how could you do this after all the effort I went through and when I just got everything I wanted? And so he proposes, Duryodhana proposes to call Yudhishthira back. At this point, everyone, Vidur, Bhishma, Drona, everyone tells the Dhritarashtra, don't. Like, just don't. At this point, even Bhishma's crying. I don't know if I mentioned this. Bhishma's cried a lot through this whole game of dice, seeing how the lineage had fallen. And I think now it was very evident to him. You know, he couldn't see earlier this rift between Duryodhana and Yudhishthira. But now it was very evident to him that this is disaster. The Dhritarashtra's exact words are, how can I refuse Duryodhana anything? I cannot bring myself to refuse him. So they called back. When the messenger goes to Yudhishthira, like, you know, literally his whole body sinks. Like his face sinks, his shoulders sink, his just, and at this point also he could have said no. But like I said in the last class, Yudhishthira did, like, when you think about how to practice dharma, this is, you know, there's rules and you can get away with certain things. There's loopholes in the rules. And so you can still be right. But Yudhishthira is a person where he really understood the spirit of the law. And so it didn't matter if he could get away on a technicality. He wouldn't get away on a technicality. And so you just see this incredible strength in Yudhishthira, that he can do that. And again, as I mentioned, maybe now in Kali Yuga, we don't even respect it as much. Because it's interesting in Kali Yuga that our ability to respect goodness has also diminished. And we think them weak, or we think them idealistic, or we think them, we don't appreciate the beauty of what's there, right? But, and so we might think, you know, why does he have to endure so much? But later on, actually, while they're in exile, Yudhishthira says, and the exact statement is, no matter what you do, and no matter how hurt I am, you will never be able to convince me to do something that is adharmic. He says this after the game of dice is over. And so, and that's interesting that he says this. Because he's hurt. He feels pain. You know, it's not that he doesn't feel pain. And interesting here that everyone feels pain. So Bhishma feels immense pain, and so he's crying. The Dhritarashtra is going to feel pain from this moment forth. Like literally in Bhaja Govindam, when Gurudev talks about that person who's living on medicine and not on food, who's living with blood pressure and heart condition and has all the wealth in the world but cannot enjoy it. Gurudev gives this description, right? And he says, they have these amazing houses with amazing views, which the servants enjoy because they're in bed and they can't be exposed to sunlight. They can't sit up straight. They can't walk because they're so ill. The table is spread with like the most amazing food, but they can't eat any of it. And they're eating only medicine, pills. This is literally what the Dhritarashtra's life becomes. He now is the wealthiest king on the planet. And he doesn't have a moment's peace. Not a single night does he able to sleep well. So, okay, let's say what happens first, even though we all already know it. Yudhishthira comes back. Shakuni states the rule. Everything will be ours. If you lose, you will have to go into the forest for 14 years. 13 years, you will live in the forest. On the 14th year, you will have to live in disguise. If we find you, you have to live for another 14 years. If you finish the 14 years successfully without us being able to find you, you can have your kingdom back. This "you can have your kingdom back" is just like to look good. They had no intention. They really didn't think the Pandavas could be hidden. They definitely thought that actually Duryodhana thought he'll kill them while they're in the exile. And so they wouldn't have to give up the kingdom. That's really what the Duryodhana thought, which is it's incredible sometimes how beautiful, like you can see how beautiful Yudhishthira's mind is. Like it's so beautiful, we can't understand it so beautiful. And then, and how can Duryodhana's mind be so like the counter opposite of that? Like, how are we capable of such extremes in terms of how we choose to live? It really is, this in itself is a wonder. And of course, most of us don't go to either extreme. We're not so amazing, we're not so horrendous also, which is also interesting, that why are we so non-committal? Yeah, this is really my more and more we're working with the younger generation. The commitment phobia has been taken to a whole new level. They do not even commit to come to class. They do not commit to come to camp. They do not commit to, they don't commit to anything. Never mind a relationship. They don't commit to career. They don't commit to social events. They don't commit. We'll see. When will I decide? After the event has started, if it looks good on social media, I'll go. You see, Yudhishthira's commitment to dharma is incredible. So, of course, Shakuni wins. The Pandavas leave. Now, this scene where the Pandavas are leaving Hastinapur is very interesting. It's, you know, the Mahabharata, and I haven't actually gone into it, but the Mahabharata is highly, highly symbolic. And in this scene, there's this, it's described at such length that Yudhishthira, while leaving Hastinapur, never looks up. And so later on, Vidur gets called by Dhritarashtra and asked. Dhritarashtra is asking Vidur to describe how they left, what happened, who said what, who did what. And when he specifies that Yudhishthira never looked up, it's because Yudhishthira was so angry that he would have burnt Hastinapur. So here we are thinking, you know, Yudhishthira is the sweet, nice guy. But you must remember, Yudhishthira has so much tapasvic power. Like he has been committed to dharma, he has sacrificed, he has endured, he has really, really been steadfast. Now imagine how strong his mind was. And he was so angry. And because of his commitment to dharma, he knew if he looked at anyone, they would have burned to ashes. Like Lord Shiva kind of strength here, that he could have burned people to ashes. Like even when he said goodbye to everyone, like when he said goodbye to the Dhritarashtra, Bhishma, he didn't look up. He didn't look up at anyone. He looked down. Beam is Beam's anger literally stays alive for 14 years. Actually not very healthy at all. Bhim's anger. And Bhim's anger comes out all on Yudhishthira for 14 years. Now you talk about endurance. Yudhishthira endures that. He endures Bhim's anger. Never once says anything. Except that line that if y'all think I don't feel, of course I feel. Every time y'all say something, it hurts. Because Bhim used to say a lot of things. Draupadi, every now and then would. She wasn't quite as bad as Bhim, but every now and then, I guess you have a bad day, you take it out on your husband. Draupadi would do that. This is, they leave facing south, and their guru, Dyumya, is chanting mantras from Samaveda to Lord Yama. So symbolically, what does this all mean? They preparing to destroy the Kauravas, even in the way they were leaving. And I think I mentioned this last week also, that Draupadi's stained cloth seems to feature in all the descriptions quite a bit. And some people will say because it's an embarrassment, but actually it's to show how cruel the Kauravas were. Like, so when somebody is on their moon cycle, it's like, you be gentle with them. These people did exactly the opposite. So it shows that insensitivity of the Kauravas and that incredible disrespect. Incredible disrespect. And like, the heart has to be so hard when we don't feel for somebody who's in pain, or, you know, just for somebody who's with the beyond. They went beyond just her being in pain. They deliberately wanted to offend and insult. Okay, so Pandavas have left and gone to exile. Dhritarashtra keeps going to Vidur to try and get some kind of solace. It's interesting that Dhritarashtra always goes to Vidur to get solace. Is it because they're brothers? Is it because Dhritarashtra knows Vidur is right? And so if Vidur says it, then it's okay. I'm not sure why, because Vidur gives no solace. Vidur was like, you should have killed your son. It's like, you have destroyed this kingdom. Vidur is so fiercely blunt and so fiercely critical and so fiercely, and you know, like I said, the Dhritarashtra doesn't sleep now after hearing everything. He's and then icing on the cake, Narad Muni comes to visit the Dhritarashtra and says, you have 14 years and then you will see all your children die. So enjoy the kingdom while you can. There's no way the Dhritarashtra is going to sleep after that. He can't eat, he can't sleep. He is incredibly stressed, possibly with a lot of guilt also, but more this sense of fear of, what have I done? And the people he's most attached to. Gandharva's response is interesting. So Gurudev always likened this tatsra to the mind, which is blind. So our own minds, our minds are always blinded by our emotions. I want this, and so then I'm blind to everything else. I like this, and so I'm blind to the repercussions of how I behave when I do like something. And that's why the Dhritarashtra is blind, that representation of us being blinded by our emotions and our desires and our attachments. And yet there's a part of him that knows, and that's Gandhavri. Gandhavri represents the intellect. The intellect is, now Gandhavri is an interesting character because, well, we introduced to Gandhavri even before she gets married to Dhritarashtra by Bhishma, who describes how noble she is. She has done tapas, she has got boons from the rishis, she had got this boon that she's going to have 100 sons. She is a very, very noble woman, and so she would marry somebody who is blind, even though that's not ideal kind of thing, right? At that point, when she married Dhritarashtra, Pandu was the king, so you're marrying somebody who's blind and he's not the king. So, this is a princess who is able to become a queen and choosing not to become a queen and not choosing to have a husband who you'll end up having to look after takes a lot of ability to sacrifice, takes a lot of compassion, takes a lot. So that she's got lots of beautiful qualities in her heart, right? So she's clean at heart. Not only is Gandhavri clean at heart, she's also intelligent. Representing intellect means she is necessarily intelligent and she is knowledgeable. So even when Duryodhana was much younger, Gandhavri used to tell Dhritarashtra, "You're spoiling him. Don't give in to him. You're feeding his greed. You're feeding his jealousy. Guide him properly." This was Gandhavri telling Dhritarashtra. And after the game of dice, pretty much Gandhavri tells Dhritarashtra the same way Vidur tells Dhritarashtra, "You've killed your sons. By what you all have done, there is no way Bhim is going to allow them to live. Oh, I didn't tell you all the curses." So after that first game of dice is over, before Draupadi wins them all back, everyone takes, Yudhishthira doesn't make a curse. Bhim gets up and he curses that he will kill all 100 of the Kauravas, which I think I have mentioned in passing that he makes this curse. But the curse is quite detailed of how he's going to kill them. The curse is also quite detailed about for Duryodhana that he's going to break that thigh. Remember Duryodhana slapped his thigh and told Draupadi to come and sit on his thigh? And it was very, what's the word? Suggestive and sleazy and disgusting. Oh, that really bugged Bhim to no end. Actually, it bugs me also. He does this so crude. So Bhim said, "That thigh that you hit, that's how you're going to die, because I am going to break that thigh. And from that blood that comes out from there, Draupadi will wash her hair." Not sure why that was significant, but I told you, Bhim, anyway, he was angry, right? As if we make logical sense when we're angry. Which one of us makes logical sense when we're angry? But, and so, some stories of the Mahabharata, they say Draupadi didn't wash her hair for 14 years. There's no way. After 4 days only, you'll need to wash your hair 14 years. What nonsense do people talk also? How can you not wash your hair for 14 years? She was doing puja every day. She was doing seva every day. Of course, she washed her hair. And also people say she didn't tie her hair because she had said, this was not said in the main Mahabharata. I don't know if somebody added masala, or actually there's different versions of the Mahabharata as well. So maybe it's in a different version. She said she will leave her hair loose until they were all killed, and only then she would tie her hair up. Now, why is that significant? In today's world, it doesn't sound significant. Traditionally, it was considered cultured if a woman tied her hair, and it was considered uncultured if she didn't. And probably more for hygienic reasons, like your hair is falling here, there, everywhere, especially if you're cooking, if you're doing puja. But even till today, it's especially more in the South, I think it's still very much there. Loose hair is considered to be uncultured. And then, and so I can remember Guruji saying this once. That when he sees women with loose hair, he remembers Draupadi flashing her hair, showing her anger was the exact words he used. And I was so confused. Loose hair represents anger? Like how did he get to that um, conclusion? It's this narration of the story is that while they were in exile for 14 years, every time Draupadi wanted to remind Yudhishthira that I am suffering because of you, she'd flick her hair to say, see, this hair is loose. It's your fault this hair is loose because I'm only ever going to tie it after I wash it in the blood of Duryodhana's thigh and then on. This is all masala, huh? It's just good movie making. It's just not practical whatsoever. Also, that connotation doesn't hold. Maybe if we see something a certain way, then we see it that way. But even great tapasvinis never tied their hair. They're living in the forest, where they'll get hair tie from. Leaves just don't do it. Bark doesn't bend to tie hair. They wouldn't tie hair. So I don't know why this connotation of loose hair is still so much associated with Draupadi and still so much associated with culture and our culture. It's more our conduct that is important. And then also it shows how we are so conditioned to think in a certain way. Yeah. So as per this stereotype of loose hair is uncultured, someone is only considered beautiful if their hair is tied up. Complete conditioning. Complete conditioning. But that's now a different topic. Coming back to all their curses. So Bhim makes this curse. Arjuna. And it doesn't, it's the when you read the Mahabharata, have y'all ever heard a lion, a tiger actually roar? Oh, it's a magnificent sound. It starts like at the bottom of their throat and it really comes out like this loudspeaker. It's such an awesome sound if you hear them actually roar. Not recording studio roar, like in the jungle. And if you're in the jungle, because remember I grew up in Africa, and you hear that lion roar, you will for sure be petrified. It's just not possible not to feel something when you hear a lion. So Arjuna's vow was like the slow coming of the roar. The entire earth shook. Why? So we must remember here, the power of our mind holds very closely with total mind. And this is Arjuna, a fifth student of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna contained his anger. So if you remember last week, I said, Bhim makes these remarks about Yudhishthira, Arjuna stops Bhim. So not only does Arjuna contain his anger, he contains Bhim's anger. So you see this level of control that Arjuna has. And so when he just makes a resolve, it's going to come true. So he vows to kill. So Duryodhana and the Dushashan are already part of the 100 that Bhim promises to kill. So he actually, this is a little bit prejudiced in Arjuna, but he vows to kill Karna. And the entire, this was his pet hate. And even though I say that and make light of it, actually Karna in the scene of dice is so vulgar, so beneath the dignity of a Kshatriya, even beneath the dignity of a human. In this scene, Karna really is. So, earlier when Arjuna didn't like Karna, it was jealousy or competitiveness. But after the game of dice, it's wanting justice for the wrong that had been done to them. And that's why that the voice in which he takes that vow is literally like a roar, and the earth shakes with his level of anger. And then we don't see too much about Sahadev. This is why we see this. Sahadev, Arjuna, Yudhishthira, their ability to endure is phenomenal. And that's why their vows and their minds are so strong. And so Sahadev vows to kill Shakuni. And at the end of it, Sahadev says, he looks at Shakuni and he says, this is your doing. Like, I blame nobody else in this hall. I blame only you for all that has happened today. And that's why my vow is to kill you. And so again, the Sahadev's insight, like genius level insight, incredible intelligence is Sahadev. And it's a pity he doesn't talk more, because really there's such wisdom. And so yes, they all even describe how they're going to do all those acts. And then Nakula vows to kill Shakuni's son. So the entire lineage again. And so this is that whole silliness of how we constantly, like, I don't like you, but it's not enough that I destroy you. I have to destroy the whole lineage. And then that's what perpetuates this adharma and the hate and that's why the cycle keeps going. Like, let it finish between you and me. We don't though. Like, although it does at the end of Mahabharata. So all those vows were made, and they would play in the Dhritarashtra's mind. The Dhritarashtra heard the vows. He heard the anger with which they were said, the determination with which it was going to be and play. The Dhritarashtra didn't sleep. The Dhritarashtra didn't eat. The Dhritarashtra had so many health issues because of stress. Duryodhana, on the other hand, had very thick skin. He was advised again and again and again, not by Vidur, but people came to Hastinapur to sit Duryodhana down and say, what you've done is wrong. Call them back, rectify it. No, Duryodhana just couldn't hear. Didn't hear, didn't want to hear, he just didn't. Okay, so now let's leave Hastinapur for a while and let's go to exile with the Pandavas. So the Pandavas go into the forest, and as they are leaving, it's the description that Vidur gives to the Dhritarashtra is like when Ram left Ayodhya and every citizen wept. Every citizen of Hastinapur wept, seeing the 5 Pandavas leave Hastinapur. And a lot of them went with, but it was mainly the saints and sages. I don't know if you remember, I mentioned that Yudhishthira used to feed more than 100 brahmanas every day. And Draupadi would also do all this incredible seva of not just needy, but of the saints and sages. And so they all left with the Pandavas. They were happy to stay in forest. Anyway, they're supposed to stay in forest. So Yudhishthira is going to forest, we'll go same forest as Yudhishthira. And so So we see this in both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And I know the Pandavas are not an avatar, and Ramchandraji is an avatar. And when he went into the forest, he went to bless the saints and sages. But Yudhishthira also is like a saint in himself. But when he goes into the forest and he's surrounded by saints and sages, the slight difference here is that it was for Yudhishthira, this was his heaven. Or you could say this was his balm. This was his solace, his refuge, his like he how much pain to see his family go through what they went through, how much pain to know he's going to be the cause of this horrendous war. And the only thing that gave Yudhishthira solace was all these saints and sages that went into the forest with them would constantly do satsang. And so Yudhishthira was always in satsang. And so for Yudhishthira, this was a little bit of coming full circle, because if you remember, when Yudhishthira was born, it was to Pandu in the forest, and Pandu used to be in satsang. Yeah. And then that one day when Pandu was filled with desire for Madhvi, all of it gone. And Yudhishthira and brothers had to go back to Hastinapur. And so they left all these saints and sages in the forest. But Yudhishthira loved it, just like how Pandu loved living in the forest amongst the saints and sages, being in satsang. Yudhishthira loved living in the forest amongst the saints and sages, being in satsang. And so the similarity here is you see that, the Ramayana is Ramchandraji had to go for 14 years. And 13 years were amazing. And it gets written in like one para because, if not much progress in the story happens, they're just having a ball of a time in the forest. And Ramchandraji says that was the best years of his life. Sita ji says, for sure, those were the best years of her life, those 13 years when they lived happily in the forest. In the 14th year, Ravana came and then all that drama started again. Here too, the 13 years they have to live in the forest, Yudhishthira is happy, staying in satsang. As long as Bhim is not talking too much, Yudhishthira is happy. Well, he does go through heartache. He does go through a few incidences, but there is joy in staying in satsang. And then for them too, that 14th year, they have to do incognito. Lots of drama happens in the 14th year. Both stories have this similarity. Now, this is the bulk of our Puranic literature comes from Veda Vyasa writing the Puranas, but Veda Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, for those 13 years where they are in exile, they listen to a lot of satsang, and it's all written. All the satsang that they listen to for those 13 years is there. So there's the entire Ramayana comes within the Mahabharata because they're listening to the story of the Ramayana from this Rishi. Then the entire story of so many of the Puranic stories are retold in the Mahabharata during this period of time of the 13 years where they are in exile listening to satsang. And so actually the Mahabharata is an incredible wealth of knowledge because it's not just the story of the Mahabharata, it's so much satsang that Yudhishthira listens to for those 13 years. We're not going to do it. We're going to do the story. But here and there we will do a few. There are a few highlights that we will take out. Then Vidur comes to visit them. Because, even in the Ramayana, this happens. Ramchandraji says, somebody should guide us where to go. Yudhishthira also says that someone should guide us where to go. And they don't need, as if Ramchandraji needs guidance where to go. This Yudhishthira needs guidance on where to go. They don't need, but it's just that sense of respect and to show that we should seek guidance. We do follow guidance. Vidur comes and visits. And it's a very nice, beautiful exchange. And then Krishna comes, which is amazing. But before we talk about Krishna, because that, then I won't stop. I'm going to come back to Vidur. I don't know how much I've spoken on Vidur. I have a fair bit. Vidur is an incarnation of Yama. So when Vedavyasa conceived the child from the servant, and she was very, very devout, Vyasa had said that this child will be an Amsha. Well, not full incarnation. Amsha is a part of Yamraj. So we have two Amshas of Yama. In Yama is Lord of Death, Dharma. Who else? Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira is an Amsha of Yama, Lord of Death. Lord of Death manifest in full form in the Mahabharata as well during these 13 years. And that satsang we will do. Yamraj comes to teach Yudhishthira, comes to test him and then to teach him. It's a beautiful section in the Mahabharata, very well known. Vidur is the most vocal person. Before the game of dice, Vidur said so many times, don't do this. This is a bad thing to do. This is the wrong thing to do. This is adharma. Duryodhana is jealous. Duryodhana is acting out of greed. Duryodhana is achieving wealth through unrighteous ways. This wealth cannot bless you. You are ruining the lineage. Can't you understand that there's more to life than kingdom? Da, 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 da. During the game of dice, Vidur spoke so much. Stop this. Don't do this. In fact, tell Arjuna to kill Duryodhana. All of that. Very, very, very vocal. After the game of dice, Vidur speaks so much. Dhritarashtra, you are a fool. You are an idiot. How could you have done this? Don't expect me to give you any kind of solace because what you have done is the worst thing possible. Oy. I was thinking, no other character speaks as much as Vidur. When you read this whole section, no other character speaks. And Vidur speaks very clearly. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. Tell Arjuna to kill Duryodhana. How is that sugarcoating anything? Who is Vidur? Yama, death. In our lives also, many things keep happening. Some things we understand, some things we don't understand. Sometimes we know what to do, sometimes we don't know what to do, but one thing is very loud in our lives: death. It speaks very clearly, very loudly. Dhritarashtra doesn't listen. We also don't listen. Like death is trying so hard this whole time. Vidur is trying so, the only one who tried so hard for dharma to happen. Yudhishthira doesn't try so hard. Yudhishthira kind of be like, okay, now this is going to happen. Draupadi tries. Draupadi definitely tries. Arjuna was contained because of Yudhishthira. Otherwise, he would have fought. But he doesn't say. He's quiet. The only one that keeps trying to make sure dharma happens is Vidur, Yama. Still the case. It's still the case. When we see death only, we get startled. And death comes all the time. It keeps reminding us, what's wrong with you? But we keep forgetting. And then like death can happen and you see people devastated. Death can happen and you'll see, I remember this when one of the very early days in Hong Kong, my very early days of me being I was a brahmacharini then, um, new to all of what I do. Now I do it, I've done it for so many years experience, but it was very early days, literally 2, 3 months of me coming out of the ashram. Mm. And so they wanted me at the funeral. Mm. It was actually one of the, I think it was the first funeral I attended. um, somebody had passed away, obviously. Sorry to state the obvious. And I didn't know all the dynamics, but he was one of the partners. Partners had a very, very messy falling out. It was very unpleasant, as it happens, right? With money and business and all of the rest of it. So the person who he had this humongous falling out with that was so messy was also invited to the funeral, also known to me. And so he came up to me at the funeral and he said to me, he left it all behind. We fought so much, meaning him and the person that had died, right? And it seemed like it was quite intense and ugly. Didn't take any of it with him. What amazed me was, I was still also very young. Both these people knew Gurudev, both these people listened to Gurudev, both these people like not just by the way, like close, they were close to Gurudev. And he was so surprised that in death you don't take any money. Not that he was surprised you can't take money, but I guess because they had fought so much about it, that real click that happened in his head, because we hear it in satsang day in, day out, day in, day out. You take nothing with you, you come with nothing, you go with nothing. We hear it 100 times. But obviously it was so close to home for him that it really impacted. That's what I mean when I say death is speaking to us so loudly. Like to the point where it actually impacts us. And then we forget. Like even right now, the only thing that's really, really constantly reminding us to do dharma. And then every now and then we see amazing souls that smile at death. We lost Swamini Vinayananda this week. She smiled as she died. She so gracefully ended her life. She so gracefully lived her life. She so gracefully ended her life. And so death is speaking to us. And we can hear, because some of us do. Like when, for those of us who knew her, like she not only heard, she agreed, she giggled with death. And then some of us can be so dumb and just not hear, or hear and forget, hear and forget. So Duryodhana just didn't hear. Dhritarashtra, he would hear, he'd get scared, he'd forget. He would hear, he'd get scared, he would forget. Because he allowed the game of dice to happen. And Vidur throughout the Mahabharata, I'm up until the point of the actual war. When the war actually starts, I get Yamraj is very busy. Vidur goes away on Tirtha Yatra. He wasn't going to sit there and watch. And then he takes care of. So even now, The Pandavas go into exile, and Vidur says, Kunti is now too old to live in the forest. 14 years, you cannot make her endure the forest. I will look after her here in the palace. So this also you see about dharma. We think of death as something horrible and harsh, but actually it's constantly reminding us, constantly guiding us, constantly telling us what we should be doing. And when things fail, it takes care of what needs to be taken care of. Again and again and again, I see this happening. Okay, we'll pause on death. We'll come back to exile. So the Pandavas find a nice place to set up house. Yudhishthira does tapas. Yudhishthira's tapas is so powerful, Surya Devata turns up within a day. Yudhishthira's boon that his brothers should not go hungry. And so there's this really cool dish that everybody wants that is described here in the Mahabharata that Surya Devata gives Draupadi. No matter how many people come, this pot will not get empty. A small pot. She would take out the food, more food would appear. She would take out the food, more food would appear. Until Draupadi took the food and ate it herself, food would appear on the pot. Draupadi was always the last one to eat. She'd feed her husbands, she'd serve the saints and sages, and then when she ate, then she'd wash the pot. Then for the rest of the day, till the sun rises the next morning, there'll be no food. The moment the sun rises the next morning, this pot will have food. Don't y'all want this pot? Such a cool pot it was. Given to them to live for their whole 14 years. It has the way it's described, she didn't even have to cook the food, huh? It just would appear in the pot. Wondering who decided the menu. I'm very intrigued by this part. But this, of course, it's a gift from the Devatas. They've gone through enough. They need not be hungry. But in relation to this pot, there's a very nice story. Dhruvas Rishi comes to visit the Pandavas. He's come in the evening just as the sun was setting. Draupadi had already fed everyone and had already eaten. Dhruvas Rishi turns up with some 100 brahmacharis. And Dhruvas Rishi is the one that's known to get angry easily and curse. Yudhishthira tells Draupadi, please feed him and the brahmacharis. Draupadi is like, because she have already eaten from the pot. As always, Draupadi screams, Krishna! Krishna appears. Y'all think it was one time lucky? No. If Draupadi thinks of Krishna, Krishna appears. Who wouldn't want to be Draupadi? Even if you had to go through what she went through, Krishna appears like this whenever she thinks of him. And she's crying. You don't usually see Draupadi crying. Except for the game of dice, you don't really see Draupadi crying. And Krishna's like, what's wrong? And then, of course, he already knows. Krishna really likes to do natak. The Dhruvas Rishi and there's 100 brahmacharis and I've washed the pot and know how to cook and where to get the vegetables from. And then, he's got so much requirements. And Krishna said, okay, show me the pot. There must be at least one bite. Draupadi is like, at this point, insulted. Don't you think I'd know if there was one bite? I washed the pot. Krishna said, maybe you didn't wash it properly. Again, at this point, Draupadi is annoyed. What do you mean I didn't wash it properly? We're so interesting, aren't we? Like, yeah, you are, you called Krishna only. You only in doesn't. Then you're getting insulted about all the wrong things. So Krishna takes the pot from her, doesn't listen to her, doesn't pay attention to how annoyed she sounds about being insulted. And there's this small little piece of probably coriander or something, like small, tiny, not even the full leaf, like one little bit of the leaf. And he peels it off the side of the pot. And he's like, see, you didn't clean it properly. There, I got the leaf. And he eats it. And the hunger of Dhruva's Rishi and all 100 brahmacharis is satiated. In fact, Dhruva's Rishi doesn't come back to the Pandava's house because he's too embarrassed that he won't be able to eat, and he runs away. Dhruva's Rishi running away. The story is so beautiful. There's a verse in the Gita, chapter 9. Patram pushpam phalayam toyam. What does Bhagwan want from us? One leaf. Enough. This is not even full leaf. One drop of water. One flower. Few petals will do. One petal also will do. That's all Bhagwan wants from us. Given with love. This incident in the Mahabharata is related to that pot. Also, when the devatas give boons like this, they really understand who they're giving it to. Because it wasn't that the 5 Pandavas needed to eat. It was all the saints and sages in the forest that were being fed. And so here you see, they've lost kingdom, they've lost all their wealth, they've lost all their comforts. They come to the forest, and what do they get? All the wealth they need, all the food they need. Because they're surrounded by Santa Mahatma who are blessing them and doing satsang. They've been given this special vessel. And then Vedavyasa comes and tells them, I didn't tell Krishna's bit. Krishna comes. The whole thing was I was going to tell Krishna comes. So Krishna came already, right? He came as Vatstram during the game of dice. Vastram means cloth. He came as cloth. So he was there at the game of dice in unmanifest form. He was there in the game of dice as cloth. But they didn't actually get to talk to him. Now news has traveled far and wide. This has happened. They are in the forest. Krishna goes to the forest to where they are within a matter of a day or two. He reaches very, very quickly. The distance between Dwarka and Hastinapur doesn't seem to be so far. Although geographically, if you look at the map of India, it's far. I don't know how he's reaching so quickly, but then he's Krishna. But theoretically, he shouldn't be reaching so quickly because of the distance. Not because he's Krishna. He's Krishna, so nothing matters. So he reaches the forest. The devotee's relationship with the Lord is always so special. Draupadi is so annoyed with him. How could you let this happen to me, Krishna? She knows it was Krishna that saved her without a fragment of doubt. It's not like she's deluded. She knows it was Krishna that saved her. But now that it's all over, she's properly annoyed. How could you let this have happened? And as devotees, we do this. Who else to get angry with? Actually, Draupadi got angry with all and sundry. She got angry with Yudhishthira. She got angry with Bhishma, Vidur, everyone. She got angry with them. But the main anger here you see is with, and Krishna is like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. It's like this. The relationship was really adorably cute. And then Krishna is almost as though wiping the tears away from her cheeks, saying, I will get vengeance for you. Like they didn't get up and fight, I'll go now. I'll wage the war now for you. He actually does say that. And he means it. Krishna vows to Draupadi that I will ensure that the adharma that happened to you that day will be set right. So Krishna would have waged war that day. He would have taken his Narayana Sena and Hastinapur would have been destroyed like that. This is why you see Draupadi is no ordinary woman. Krishna is saying he'll wage the war for her. She doesn't agree. Who does she look at? Yudhishthira. We will do what he says. How? How can she say this? She has someone ready to wage the war there, then, now. And if Krishna says it, Yudhishthira will follow. So many loopholes, right? You can find. She could have easily gone that moment and fought the war. When we talk about power, we don't understand exactly what it is. She had the power to fight the war. Please don't get me wrong. She had the power to fight the war in that moment because Krishna would have done it. He has promised us he will do, he would have done it. Draupadi looks at Yudhishthira. Why? That's her husband. That's why she makes comments to him the whole 14 years, but not so much. Because in the end, she has accepted what he does. She has accepted if Yudhishthira has decided this, it is right. So Krishna looks at Yudhishthira. Draupadi looked at Yudhishthira, so now Krishna knows he can't fight the war until Yudhishthira. So Krishna is telling Yudhishthira, chalo, let's go now, fight. Arjuna is capable, Bhim's capable, I have full army, let's go now, let's go fight. Bhim has interesting dialogues. Bhim says, you don't need your army, Krishna. They are all worms. I'll just push them. In the middle of so much emotions, Bhim comes up with these interesting dialogues. Krishna is smiling as he says this to Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira bows down to Krishna and says, I will never, what's the word? Counter you, contradict you, go against you. You all figure out which word it is. but now's not the right time to fight the war. So Krishna says adharma was done. Why is now not the right time? Who's saying this? Krishna. Krishna is saying adharma was done. You have every reason to fight the war. This is why I said, Yudhishthira, no. Sometimes when you know too much, also a problem. What did he know? The spirit of the law. So what does Yudhishthira say? Any decision made out of anger is a dharma. Any decision made out of anger is a dharma. Any decision made wanting vengeance is a dharma. So we will wait. We will wait for 14 years. Let everyone's anger calm down. And then this is what interesting that what Yudhishthira says. And then you watch how I fight. You will not recognize the Yudhishthira that fights in the war. I will fight with all the anger I felt on that day. And he does, huh? Actually, during the war, Yudhishthira properly fights. Full on Kshatriya fights. Not for a moment does he hesitate. He keeps his word. Well, he wouldn't be Yudhishthira if he didn't keep his word. So Krishna stays with them in the forest for quite a while, mainly because of Draupadi. And you know, in the whole Bhagavad Gita, when I teach it to the Balvihar children, have I told you all this? Balvihar, depending on what age, but usually we start teaching the Bhagavad Gita to the children at about 3 or 4. Even in Shishu, we start introducing as much as we can. We have to be true to Gurudev's name. No, Gurudev wanted everyone to know Gita. So 3-year-old should also know. So what will a 3-year-old know? So this is usually what I teach. Who taught the Bhagavad Gita? Please, all of you all answer Balvihar style. Y'all better know the answer.
Krishna.
Who did he teach the Gita to?
Arjuna.
What did he say? Don't cry. That's what he says. Literally, the words in the Bhagavad Gita is, do not cry. Uttishta yudhyasva. Stand up, Arjuna. Face what you have to face. Do not cry. What does Krishna tell Draupadi? Here, when they are sitting in the forest after the game of dice, after he has wiped the tears off her cheek, Krishna tells Draupadi, do not cry. We must understand that that doesn't mean physically tears shouldn't fall from our eyes. Tears may fall from our eyes. It means don't stay in grief. Na shochati is the words of the Gita. Na, don't. Sochati is grief. Don't stay in grief. We are humans, we will feel grief. we will feel sad. Don't stay in that sadness. Uttishta. Lift yourself out of that sadness. Yudhyaswa. Yudhyasya means fight because it's a war. It means to do war. But the indication is face. Face now whatever it is you have to face. So for Draupadi, now you be here in this forest. You continue serving Santa Mahatma in the forest. Continue serving your husbands in the forest. Actually, there's this really highly charged emotional scene where Kunti is saying goodbye to Draupadi when they're leaving Hastinapur. When Kunti comes to find out what happens to Draupadi in that sabha, wow. You know, as a mother-in-law, you can imagine what she felt, especially since her sons did nothing. Because Yudhishthira only that put Draupadi on the shame, the horror, the pain that you feel for another person who goes through pain. Kunti herself had to endure so much. She would not have wanted Draupadi to endure anything. Like Kunti endured so that others didn't have to endure. And then what Draupadi had to endure more than what even Kunti had to endure. And so Kunti's heartache. And then, so as Kunti is saying bye to Draupadi, she says, my sons are alive because of your love. Imagine, huh? What a nice sentence. So please keep loving them. And as a mother, what she would have felt. And so here Krishna is telling Draupadi. But first he listened. She was angry, he listened. He said sorry. He wiped her tears. He said, I'll give you whatever you want. Now you want me to go kill all of them? Right now I'll go. Then he said, don't cry. Now it's over. Now no need to cry. And so how do we deal with our emotions too? You can have your little rant, Krishna said. How long? 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So don't make it too long on a rant also. Okay, one day max. Max. Then remember he's there. He only saved her. Even now he's saying he'll get her what she wants. She will see all the Kauravas die. Dharma will be reestablished. You know, when we talk about making Krishna a friend, we usually think of Arjuna as Krishna's friend, but actually Draupadi's friendship with Krishna is too cool. Way cooler. Well, you can't really compare. Both are cool. Okay, we'll pause here for today. Next week, we'll see what they come, because Veda Vyasa comes to give instructions. Questions? Yeah. Dhritarashtra?
Yeah. What was the turning point from here? You went through it last week, but what was the turning point for him to give it all back? Was it the omens?
Yeah.
It was the omens.
Yeah, so why did Dhritarashtra give the whole wealth and kingdom back to the Pandavas? Yeah, he realized that when the cloth didn't end, that this was a miracle, literally a miracle. And so the hand of God is at play. And Dhritarashtra is blind, he couldn't see it. He couldn't see the cloth, but it was being described to him. Because the whole court was like, oh, so obviously you're going to say what happened, what happened. And he had Sanjaya sitting next to him, telling him word for word narration of what's going on. So, so seeing the hand of divine protect the Pandavas, scared Dhritarashtra. Krishna becoming cloth is the turning point for many people in the game of dice. And in a way, it was for Yudhishthira as well. Like Yudhishthira told Draupadi to come so that she could plead for dharma. And that incredible faith that Yudhishthira also had, even though Draupadi had to go through horrendous heartache, that incredible faith that Yudhishthira had that dharma will protect her. Like as much as Draupadi knew Krishna would save her, that much Yudhishthira knew Krishna would save her. Of course, you can't really like Yudhishthira during the game of dice, and I'm not going to ask you all to like him during the game of dice, but that level of Shraddha Yudhishthira did have. Even here for the Yudhishthira to tell Krishna, now is not the right time to fight the war. Like, how can you tell Krishna when's the right time to fight the war? That much faith he has in Krishna. That Krishna is doing this to appease Draupadi. But he knows that I know what dharma is. And he knows I will not falter. He will support me. And Krishna does. When Yudhishthira says no decision made out of anger is dharma, Krishna's like, well, okay, then we'll wait. Yudhishthira does know dharma the best. Krishna does all that, Chavi. So there was a hall. So there was this. So the Pandavas built the hall of illusions. And then Duryodhana got jealous. And so they built this new palace, the Kauravas. And they invited Draupadi, Kunti, and the Pandavas to visit this new palace. And so the palaces have a wing for the women. And this was the public hall. So the women didn't come into this public hall. Draupadi only was dragged out into this public hall. So the other women didn't know what was going on. They didn't, to follow their husbands to the hall. Only the Pandavas went to the forest. They went, no. All the other wives didn't follow the Pandavas to the forest. Actually, the Pandavas living in the forest was Yudhishthira was very happy. Actually, except for Bhim, everyone was okay. Nakula, Sahadev also. Sahadev didn't quietly sat somewhere, whether in the palace or whether in the forest. He didn't talk much, bicharo. Nakula loved animals. So in the forest, Nakula was with the animals, and so he was quite content. Draupadi was serving, as she did whether she was in the palace or the forest. And this we'll see next year. Arjuna goes to do tapas. So nobody's actually sitting with their wives. You wouldn't, they were married to princesses. They wouldn't ask the princesses to live in the forest. But I think many visited. Even Krishna visits a few times. Everyone visits. Narad when he goes to visit, Vashishta goes to visit. So many saints and sages go to visit because there's so many satsangs. Hmm. Any other questions? Swami Ninji, what about Gandhavri? What did she say when she found out about Draupadi? I didn't mention. Gandhavri told the Thrashtra that, yeah. Oh, I didn't mention? Yeah, the Kauravas are going to all die. I did. You've killed this lineage. You've killed all our sons. Gandhavri did try to talk to Duryodhana when he was younger. As he got older, no. Gandhavri had tried to discourage Dhritarashtra from giving in to Duryodhana when he was younger. He didn't listen. He gave in. And every time he gave in to Dhritarashtra gave in to Duryodhana, Gandhavri used to warn him. Even now, Gandhavri tells Duryodhana also, what you've done is wrong. How can you enjoy this kingdom? It's going to bring your death. Gandhavri says it. By and large, she does. But as a mother, every now and then, she also gets soft. But she does. She does clearly say it. Yeah. And in fact, in one of the versions of the Mahabharata that I read, Gandhavri says to Duryodhana, if Draupadi wasn't as noble as she was, she would have killed you all there and then. Your death is delayed. But she will, because of what you've done, you will die. Hmm. No, the 14 years is not to give Duryodhana a chance to make things better. In the Bhagavatam, it is said, so this is Mahabharata, but in the Bhagavatam, it is said, when people are doing adharma, Bhagwan gives a very long rope. How far will you go? So Kamsa killed so many babies. Then Bhagwan acted. So if you do little bit wrong, you forgive him. He'll try and correct you. He'll try and, there's always hope you'll improve. But after a certain point, you have to do so much bad, then he can destroy you. That's why Kali Yuga is so horrible. At some point, it's not going to improve, so it has to get that bad, so Bhagwan can destroy it all. We are getting there. So the point, that's the explanation given in Bhagavatam. The explanation that I gave earlier today was, Yudhishthira said, don't make any decision out of anger. So if we lost and we have to be here for 14 years, be here for 14 years. After 14 years, you're angry, be angry and fight. But don't not keep your word to be here for 14 years and attack now out of anger. Any decision made out of anger is a dharma, even though you might have all the technical reasons for it to be dharma. So Krishna had all the technical reasons for it to be dharma. It wouldn't have been wrong for them to attack at that point in time. That's why I said, Yudhishthira, follow the spirit of the law. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.